Um, oh, first of all, today's class 9, and our last class is next week. And I want to talk about relationship between spirituality and science. Peter and I are hard at work on talking on that topic with each other, but also kind of where do we all go from here? Where does each of us want to go from here? What from whatever we've talked about is something that inspires you to move in a certain direction. What do you want to? What are you inclined to do with whatever you got from this class? Okay, so the headline sort of is in keeping with the concentric circles and with talking about the calling it a narcissistic paradigm, is that fascism is narcissism in the political realm. Actually, I'm going to make one little change here in my view. And fascism is narcissism in the political realm. Now, it's an extreme version, but it is grounded in the values and failings of the mainstream culture and economic and political system. The conventional view is that civilization is the cure to fascism, that fascism comes and that civilization must clamp down on the populace and on the essentially evil, if you want to call it that, side of human nature to create civilization. And implicit in that is really the underlying assumption that it's human nature and ordinary people that are responsible for fascism. That's implicit. I remember being very upset, and then we all, there's nothing to be done about it, that the media called Trump's right-wing shit populism. And that became the word to describe the right-wing movements around the world, including in Europe. And if you're calling it populism, then the implication is that it's the fault of the people. And give me a second here. Yeah, and it's using populism to mean popular, but everything that's popular, that's a meaningless use. If everything that's popular is populism, if the fact that a bunch of people are following it makes it populism, that's a meaningless word, because populism presumably would be a set of policies that speaks for and represents and wants to empower the populace. So it's a false populism, but the fact that they've anointed these right-wing movements by calling them populist, I think that's unconsciously done, but that's unconsciously based on the idea that the problem is the people, and then presumably the solution is civilization clamping down on the people's antisocial tendencies. So if you have the view that the solution is for civilized institutions to clamp down, what you're saying is essentially that we have to increase authority over the rabble. And the problem with the idea of increasing authority over the rabble is that that's disempowerment of ordinary people. That's part of the disempowerment of ordinary people. And it's disempowerment of ordinary people that is the ground for fascism. Now, that notion is tempting, I would say right now with Trump, for instance, because we're watching civil institutions crumble and fall and not stand up for themselves vis-a-vis Trump's authoritarian stuff, not holding him accountable. So there's a whole part of me anyway that says, these institutions have to stand up. These institutions should throw some people in jail. These institutions do need to hold people accountable. and what's happening and how are we allowing these institutions to crumble. So, and I believe that, I do believe that, but that's only a surface solution to the underlying problem, which is that this empowerment of the populace is the source, in my opinion, of the susceptibility to fascism and authoritarianism. The other thing with calling these things populist is that it ignores the role of the system, not in creating the fertile ground for fascism. And it does that in two ways. One, the system systematically exploits, profits from, escalates, and promotes divisions among the people, including its tendency to scapegoat certain populations and often scapegoat the least empowered portions of the population in a way that divides the whole and therefore makes it difficult for democratic forces to stand up to entrenched power, because it's hard for those forces to be, though their interests are united to operate in a united way. So that's one way that this existing system of power profits from divisions among people and promotes scapegoating. So the problem is immigrants, or the problem is Black people, or the problem is gay people, or the problem is whatever, women. That's not a minority, but you know, the problem is those people who are disempowered. They're the problem, and trying to promote an identification of the populace with the system of power. You're like us, either, you know, because we're white, because we're male, because whatever, because we don't like to be told what to do. We don't like environmental restrictions. You don't either. We don't like taxes. You don't either. We're in the same boat, us, 0.5% or whoever they are, and you. And that's cases made to everyone, but it's made, I think, unfortunately, most convincingly to disenfranchised white males. And you can see that in, you know, the German industrialists, when Hitler came in, their attitude was, this guy is a nut, but he's our nut. And that's exactly been the view, I think, of corporate America, largely vis-a-vis Trump. This guy's nuts. This guy's a loose cannon. But as long as he's helping us basically enforce the corporate agenda, including getting rid of corporate taxes, including getting rid of environmental restrictions, including putting in a right-wing Supreme Court. As long as he's doing that, what the hell? And how that took place a lot was in all these conversations where they said, God, we just wish he wouldn't say this shit. We wish he'd be presidential. Doesn't he know that when you're a presidential candidate, you don't say that stuff? And the hope that he would get presidential, which is meaning that he would learn. Well, I think I said it. There was a wonderful Saturday Night Live skit where they had Romney saying essentially to Trump something like, we don't say our racism, we imply it. So and the other way that the system creates the conditions for fascism is that, Quinn, we can do this together here, that it denies a constructive.
Oh, that one.
It denies people a constructive, respected, empowerment, and contributing membership in a worthy whole. We don't get to, it doesn't offer many opportunities. And if you're just looking for work, you're looking for a job, finding work that's meaningful and that pays you. If you want meaningful work, go be an artist and live, live on whatever you can scrape together. But if you want to make something, then if you want to be wealthy, the odds of finding something worthwhile to do and make a whole bunch of money is pretty selective. So,
Mhm.
so if you deny people a constructive, respected, empowered, and contributing, I want to say contributing is really important. There's practically no one who won't say, I want to leave the world a better place for my children than it was, or a better place than when I came here. That's a profound instinctive need. So it's not just to be supported by and be nurtured by it, but to contribute to a worthwhile whole. So if you don't get that, and so again, to be clear, to be a citizen or a member, and on the ecological level, to be a niche in the ecosystem, involves both the opportunity to develop and offer your full individual potential, to get to be fully ourselves. That's part of being empowered, not to give yourself up for the whole, not to be a martyr, to get to be fully for yourself, and to be a respectful of others, and respectful of the needs of the whole, and contributing to the needs of the whole. So again, and that's sort of how I've been defining belonging, as this complex balance. And when we're not offered genuine empowered membership, our evolutionary, which is I'm saying that's our evolutionary hunger built in, our evolutionary guidepost. That's how we know when things are not right. Then that need gets misused. Then we're very vulnerable to have that misused and to offer false membership, which is sort of a loss of self. And that's what happens at the point when you better agree. If you want to be part of this club, guess what? Trump won the election. If you have any thoughts about that to the contrary, you ain't in the club anymore. So that's a loss of self, the giving up of self in order to have membership. It's not empowered membership. And then the other side of it is there's not a model of empowered, respectful, pro-social membership. So instead, you get to bask in the so-called superpower. Only I can fix it. The so-called superpower and utter invulnerability of the leader. So those are two faux ways of I'd say hijacking our instinctual structure and guidance and to misuse it. So, and part of the false power, when I think about it, one of the things I think about, there was an early film with Trump where he was meeting for the first time with international people, and the camera comes on and he pushes the Norwegian, somebody, the Norwegian aside, and then he goes to the front, and then he does his Mussolini face.
Yes.
He's chin up.
Yes.
And the same thing he did when he came out of the hospital, right? Just looking at him with his Mussolini jaw, somehow we're just supposed to go, wow, isn't that amazing? So basically, the invitation to partake via adulation in someone else's power, which of course is not empowerment.
I saw that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw that clip where he shoved that guy aside a dozen times. I wanted to just scream. I couldn't. I wanted to go punch him. It was the most rude move I have seen. I mean, a third grader would know better.
And then the pose he adopts after doing so and getting on the camera is a caricature. It's like hilarious.
Yes, like I'm here now. We can begin whatever it is you guys want to do. Oh, it's horrid.
Yeah.
Horrid. Yeah.
So, anyone else have something they want to chime in at this point, or? Okay. So, I had a dream a few years ago, One of the things, right, that when we think our brain, our conscious mind is supposed to run everything, is that there's not a respect for, among other things, for the wisdom of the unconscious, which is, of course, what Jung is all about. So I had this dream, and I don't actually remember much of the dream itself, but I woke up with a aha. It's like, oh, I get it. Somehow that was part of the dream. And as I shifted into waking life, the conclusion of the dream was, oh, I get it. Fascism is a hatred of life. Fascism is a hatred of life. And then I started thinking about that, and I thought, that in some way it's ironic, because fascism would describe itself as, in the German case, as a celebrator of blonde vigorousness and power and life. They weren't even puritanical. The women were supposed to be good breeders. So they would surely consider themselves highly pro-life, pro-vigor, so why would my unconscious say that it's a hatred of life? And so the way I then thought about it in a minute, it's a hatred of half of life. It's a hatred of the vulnerable, death, dying, vulnerable, fragile side of life. And if life and death go together, then it's a hatred of the surrender that's involved in of self, that's involved in having one's parts go to, the tree or the person's parts going to be reused, to be recycled. So it's a hatred of, but if it's a hatred of half of life, then it's a hatred of real life. It's a hatred of real life, because if you don't accept that aspect of life, then you don't accept life, and you're living in and attempting to live in a delusion. And so that's right there. You can see that it is a form of narcissism. It does the same thing that a narcissistic individual does. So it's to deny the weak, vulnerable, loser, defeatable, fragile, tender side of life, that part of yourself, and part of the German people in his case, but it doesn't have to be German. It doesn't have to be a white race necessarily, but in this case it was. So our people, we're not vulnerable. We're not, and by the way, nationally, this usually comes from people who've just suffered a huge national defeat. So Germany had just suffered a super national defeat in the Second World War that included the victors insisting on unconditional surrender, which is not, I think that was one of the first time that was codified, unconditional surrender. So Germany had suffered a terrible defeat, and that powerlessness then sets a ground for wanting to be vigorous, powerful, virile, and for rejecting any of the vulnerable sides of ourselves and of our people. So then the next thing you do, just like a narcissist, you project weakness onto the other, right? So for Trump, it's the people he can defeat. But in the German case, you project it onto the others, which are the Jews, the gypsies, gay people, artists, whoever. You project it onto them, and once projected out, then you try to eradicate it. But you're eradicating a part of yourself too, and a part of your nation too, in eradicating the people who onto whom you've projected half of the reality of life. And then in place of that, what you build up is a strong, false, delusional view of yourself or of your nation, of Hitler or the German people. But on the individual level, it would be a kernel in the in the SS, you build a false and delusional view of your invincibility. You are invincible, and the parts of you that are invincible are shameful and to be eradicated internally and socially. And to maintain that delusion, and the next thing is that delusion has to be maintained by fiercely upholding the self-image of power. During Nazi times, people were arrested for standing in a crowd that was being given a Nazi speech and not looking enthusiastic. So, however, since this power is delusional, it inevitably oversteps itself. The delusions are not functional. So you decide to invade Russia in the winter. You decide to take on fighting at every front, not saying, you know, let's deal with Russia after we've defeated France or something like that, you know, or England. And you get buoyed heady about the early victories where everybody just surrendered to you because no one was prepared for or expected your aggression. So you think you learned from how the ease of your early conquests, how aggression pays off. And if you're just aggressive enough, you can get whatever you want in the world. So interesting question then is, how do you react when reality strikes? When reality strikes. So in Trump's case, for example, it turns out that he won by a landslide. And he needs that. It's absolutely essential. He won by a landslide. And then going along with that is the entry ticket to be in the Trump club. If you explicitly say, cast doubt on the fact that he won by a landslide, you're out. And that's the dance that various Republican leaders are doing. So I have always wondered, how does someone whose only faith, whose only belief, whose only value is winning, how does someone whose only value is winning deal with being defeated? And you know, early on with Trump, everybody thought, well, he was just desolate and roaming the halls and mumbling to himself, and everybody went, oh my God, you know, until he was able to reshape, you know, to get his facade back up. And his resilience as a narcissist is that ultimately he'll just resurrect his facade because he has to, doesn't know how to live in the world otherwise. So there's a movie about Hitler that's a fantastic movie. I think it's called Downfall. I really recommend it. It's acted by Gunther. Oh, I can't. One of the most wonderful German actors who was in a lot of Werner Herzog movies. He was sort of a major leading man. He's an old guy now. Not that old guys can't be leading men. So he acts in this movie, and the movie is well researched because it's based on the notes and memories of a young woman who was invited to be a secretary into the bunker when Hitler is having final days in the bunker under Berlin. And so the main theme of the movie is, so my thinking is, Hitler is hunkering down, hiding in a bunker under Berlin, under this incredible city that he had, what's his name, the architect built these monuments for. The city that was the center of the 1,000-year Reich, right? With, again, the grandiose architecture to support that notion. And the city is in rubbles. and the Russians are at the edge of town and coming in. And his people, German people, Jews, of course, were German people too, until it was explained to them that they weren't. But what he considered his people are scrounging through the rubble for scraps of something to eat. And the point is, you cannot be more defeated. You cannot be more decisively defeated than hunkered in a bunker under the rubble of your capital city, of your nation, with your people scrounging around, those that are left. And it's mostly old people and kids, because of the, you know, all the remotely able-bodied men have already been sent off and died off in, you know, in the wars elsewhere. You cannot be more defeated than that. And so I go, well, this is going to be interesting. How does he deal with being defeated? So the movie answers that question. And the main theme of the movie, oh, so I just, by the way, I did a little math here. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. And it really only lasted 6 years if you want to talk about when he started invading everybody else, so maybe even 4 or 5, you know, but at most 12 years, the 1,000-year Reich. And so I did a little math. I'm not very good at math, but I managed this. That means he was 988 years wrong. So that's a pretty big miscalculation, I think. Anyway, so the main theme of the movie is that general after general, I mean, these are hardened Nazi generals, come into the bunker and say, please, please, would you, what's the word, accept it? Would you, what do you call it when you, would you surrender? Please, would you surrender? Because we are tired of executing 11 and 12-year-olds for desertion, or sending them with whatever weapons they can find to fight the Russian army, which has already defeated us and is coming into town. Please, we can't stomach this anymore. These are Nazi generals. And Hitler won't do it. He will not surrender. And there's a conversation there where a Speer comes to him and says, can't, you know, for the love of your people, can't you surrender? These are your people. And Hitler says, I will never surrender, because I thought the German people were winners, were victorious and winners. And they weren't. They were, turned out they were not strong, but weak. And they let me down. The German people, by not winning, they let me down. And essentially he says, let them die, fuck them. I'm not surrendering. And he literally says, saving their bodies is of no interest, you know, because their soul, you know, they've already lost their souls or their value, which would be to be part of his fantasy. So anyway, that's how it's handled. He's still a winner, except he was let down by them. So no taking responsibility, no empathy, essentially no ability to learn or shift or be affected in any, you know, way one could imagine by being utterly defeated. And this next little piece I want to talk about, I call it cure. I didn't want to leave it all in this horrible state, but I want to invite some conversation in the meantime before I do that. And one of the things that, you know, that to be learned from that is, how do we integrate and respect our vulnerable part and invite it into who we are. In a way that doesn't mean just collapsing, you know, just being a victim.
You mean politically or just individually with each of
Yeah,
us?
it could be individually. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, because all of us in one way or other have to integrate how vulnerable we are being a living critter on this planet.
Well, for me, it's interesting. I never had a sense of vulnerability like I've had in the aging process, in terms of losing the ability to, I used to lift weights a lot and I can't do what I used to do. And I used to run and I can't run anymore because of my knee. I have a fake knee that's poorly made, poorly done, so I can't run anymore. It's losing those things. And I think old age is all about loss. And that's a very vulnerable feeling because you can't control at all the things. Friends have died, and you know, things like that. It's for me, it's embracing the aging process.
Yeah. You know, even though if we had the choice, we'd say, no, you know what, let's skip this aging thing. Still live long, but couldn't we just pass on this one?
Yeah, I saw a woman interviewed the other day, was 110, and she was very intellectually lucid.
Huh, cool.
Yeah,
I saw that one
110.
too, Quinn.
Yeah, sweet old lady.
Yeah.
He's talking about racism.
That was Lisa Ling, right?
Yep.
Yep. That's a great show.
Yeah, I watch it.
Oh, I just realized, you know, in the class that I'm facilitating a traumatic grief group with Winter Spring, and there's this woman who talks about toxic positivity, talks to how our culture is all about toxic positivity, but also how, you know, when you're in grief, people who are trying to encourage you or want you to get over it or want you to have a positive attitude for, you know, people that's actually cruel, you know, because it's protecting yourself because you don't want to get it, what it's like to experience something like that. And so the person feels alone and abandoned. So so if you look up toxic positivity, if you Google it, I had the name of the woman, but I don't have it. Or if you look up, there's a book written, there's a TED talk about that I heard. This is what got me onto it. And the TED talk also talks about, well, and so there's someone who wrote a book, and it may be the same woman, called Terrible, Thanks for Asking. And she talks about toxic positivity or toxic, yeah, something like that. Anyway, that's an example of a sort of narcissistic response. And of course, nobody gets it, what it's like to lose a child unless you do. Nobody gets it. You can't get it. You don't want to imagine it. But you can at least have humility in response to people who are dealing with something that's beyond what you can imagine. So all these people have suffered enormous amount of abandonment and pain as a result of people telling them how they ought to be handling their grief. Anyone else want to chime in? I hope none of the rest of you is aging.
Yeah.
Right.
Avoid it if you can.
Bob, can
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question of you and the others in the group about
Go.
fascism.
Yeah.
When I think about fascism, I think that one of the really important ingredients is the dependence of fascist leaders on religion, on aspects of religion. And part of their appeal is to resort to, whether they believe it themselves or not, to resort to some parts of dominant religion in their culture. I mean, often Christianity, but not always. So I was just wondering, what are people's thoughts about that? And I don't know what to do with it particularly, but I'm curious to know what people think about that.
Well, I agree with that, and I heard, and I can't remember where, that prior to the election, Trump went to the evangelicals and said, if you can deliver them, I will do whatever you want, which he agreed to be anti-gay, anti-abortion, and to really tout, run around with the Bible. And by what I can tell, it's exactly part of what happened that got him in, was he delivered the things that they asked him to deliver. And they delivered all those votes. And I think it is a very, what with Trump, it was certainly a very big part of it. I still see him holding that Bible after he kicked up all those people in front of that church. Yeah, I do.
Personally, I don't think there's anything more powerful than using God to, in combination with that, whatever view it is that you're wanting to take on or whatever. There is no greater bond or power than that. Thus saith the Lord. And that's what he did. And is still doing. And the far right Christian people are still right there with him.
Yeah, I would, yeah, really. I'd like to comment on the church thing in Germany. Hitler turned against the Lutheran Church in Germany very powerfully, and he launched the Nazi Church. The reason he launched the Nazi Church is because the Lutheran Church of Germany was not giving him that kind of blessing and support and anointing. And so he formed his own church, and he served as the God. And that's where the reason a lot of the Lutheran people in Germany turned against him, not because they were against his policies and stuff, but because they were against him claiming to be God. So they couldn't, deal with that. So yes, if Trump was really lucky in that he could get a lot of the right-wing evangelical churches to come out and support and anoint him. But the majority of churches did not anoint him or come out for him. The majority of churches in this country opposed him. So it doesn't matter, because those churches that opposed him didn't have a voice. They didn't have a forum. They didn't have a playing field that they could play on. They were excluded from it. And the media helped exclude them. And there was no way, because of the way it was set up, for the majority of religious people in this country to oppose the right-wing evangelicals who have taken center stage and claim to be the only Christians in the world. So that these are things that happen in Germany, and they happen here too. But there was less less organized opposition this time around than there was in Germany. So I think it's a really interesting point. And yes, anytime you can get God on your side, you're going to get a lot of votes, and especially when you can claim to be God, and people believe you, and believe they believe that you're their savior. So that the God thing is really powerful, I think, and religious groups that can't counter that are they're really failing to do their spiritual and moral witness to their people. And I think that it's really the way the media works. It ends up saying the majority of the Christians in this country are just like the right-wing evangelical Christians in this country.
Right.
And there's no way that we can do anything about it because that's how it is. But it wasn't that way in Germany, and it wasn't that way here, but it was presented that way.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I grew up in the days of the civil rights movement where there was not just Black, but also, there was a strong progressive Christian church that was trying to apply what they considered to be Christian values, such as do unto others and so forth. Yeah.
Well, and the right-wing evangelical people, as Javon was saying, they had the platform because they are the ones who have used corporate America to get the platform. They are the ones that have the programs on TV and no matter what they do wrong, they seem to continue to have their platforms. And that is really, I said it all last year, well, all during Trump's whole thing. The media was a huge part of the problem, and it still is a huge part of the problem. There is no journalism anymore, in my opinion, in the mainstream way of speaking about the news, because it's all about ratings, it's all about money, and it's all about the program and the show. It's really not about speaking the truth, and it's whatever is the news cycle of the last 24 hours, and then if something seems to be very popular, they harp on it and harp on it and harp on it. And like the Rittenhouse trial right now. And so nobody else gets a platform except the sensationalism, and they've already permeated the programs because they have the money. And I mean, it just is a vicious circle. I'm not sure what to do about it, but.
Yeah, me either. It's provocation, 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 provocation. And we're distracted from distraction by distractions. It's.
What did you say?
Just
I got
we're
distracted.
distracted by distractions from distraction. That's a quotation, I think, from.
Take credit for it. It's cool.
Anyway, never mind.
It's a good one.
I wanted to say, that little rap includes belonging to something greater than yourself that is ultimately sacred. And so what's interesting and I think unusual about Nazism is it was not a particularly Christian or religious movement in its iconography. So what it makes sacred then is the leader, the flag, the Nazi flag, the race. So if you can find something that you make sacred and unquestionable, it can serve in the same way. And I also think that people who are used to doing that in religious terms are probably very susceptible to doing it in non-religious terms, sort of transferring that psychology from a church to authoritarian leader like Hitler. Anyway, cool.
Yep, that's right.
I think I want to move on if I can, unless somebody has one more thing to say on this question. To the cure. Now, my description of the cure will unfortunately be sufficiently abstract that it won't tell any of us exactly what to do, but best I can do. Oh, and in my notes, the cure, I don't know if it is in red in big letters. That's because I kept going like, I don't want to just depress everybody. So, so the cure is not to overcome, separate from, kill and suppress our human nature, but to build on the instinctual guidance that we have been inherited from the long evolutionary process, which has always been at every level the creation of membership and increasing wholes in a way that has worked enough that it created us from a one cell to a tissue, to an organism, to a species, you know, and within an environment. And it's that instinctual heritage that I have attempted to summarize, but with Quinn's phrase.
Now
Now
it's mine.
Well, it was fun for me that you sort of grabbed onto it. I felt validated by that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it's Quinn's phrase now. Anyway, now, again, I want to be clear. That does not mean that the answer is to slavishly follow all our emotional reactivity to everything. Because that's precisely how our instincts get misused and exploited, and exactly what's going on with the Trump thing. So the anger, the rage at being left out, at not having our needs met, can be that anger is legitimate, but it is easily misused. It doesn't mean let's just be angry and there is no conventional reality. There is no collective reality. We can make up whatever truth we want. So I'm not saying that. It's still the responsibility of our, let's call it our prefrontal cortex, to guide us, but to guide us with consultation, in consultation with and in service of the positive aspects of our instinctual structure. And so where that helps, I hope and think for me, where it helps me with empathy is, and empathy is not easy at certain levels. And again, I don't, empathy for Trump himself, I leave to better human beings than me, but I'm talking about the followers. That they're working off the same instinctual structure that we are. It's just being misused. They also want to be part of something. They want to be part of something that's important. They want to be part of something that wants to change the world, that claims to be changing the world. And they want to be part of something big and some power that will overcome everything that they find insulting about their position and how they're treated in this culture, economically, socially, and whatever. So again, and so that's used by replacing faux belonging and faux membership. And it's faux belonging because the belonging doesn't involve your ability to be fully yourself, because you, for instance, have to, you can't possibly see that COVID is killing people, or you can't possibly see that, killing people who are not vaccinated. You can't possibly, there's a loyalty test, right? You can't possibly see that Trump lost the election. Okay. So there's a giving up of self. So it's not an empowered membership. And, and it's not respectful of the rest of the world, of those who aren't members.
Yeah.
So, but I want to say it's not just so. So that means, how do we look at that, our warrior tendency, if you want to call it that, our warlike, but our warrior tendency? How do you look at that? Is it just the evil side of human nature, or does it exist because it was adaptive and pro-social in some way, at some level in our evolution? So, for instance, the warlike tendency to defend the tribe from other tribes, so that, and to defend territory so that we'd have enough territory that we could find the I'm talking about hunter-gatherer tribes, so we could find the game and the tubers and whatever else we needed to survive. That warlike tendency was adaptive, and it's important, I think, to see that it was pro-social. By which I mean, it meant that you were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for the whole. You were willing to kill and die for, to go to war for, to defend the tribe. And in terms of sex roles, meant to defend the nurturing and ongoing life process of women and raising children, of the hearth. So okay, so now this same instinct is not adaptive, is no longer adaptive when the appropriate we is not the tribe, but the species or the planet. At that point, are making sharp distinctions between us and them, supporting us at the expense of them, seeing us and them as in opposition. At that point, it's no longer adaptive. It's no longer adaptive at our level of our evolutionary development and the powers available to us to have made the world one world. So can we put that warrior energy? Yeah, go ahead, Rita.
So about that, I've thought about this, about us and them. That takes two sides. One side can't just see that it's not us and them. It takes both of those, because I look at my relatives who are, oh my God, off the hook, far right, and post crap on social media all the time about it. I see the humanness. I understand where they come from. I understand how they got there. But there is no reciprocation of that at all. If I cannot see their side, then I am just a heathen and I am dismissed as such. And so
painful.
It takes two. It takes two to tango, so to speak.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the question, whether you can't be a warrior for a greater we, which may include opposing them. Right. So the ways in which you are striking blows, to use a intentionally aggressive metaphor, that the ways, however ways you find to strike blows for a better world, a connected world, a world that isn't all about what, blah, blah. You're using your warrior energy that way. And it may be that it's not necessarily that you want to go punch out your friends, but it may be that on the larger level, you do see yourself in opposition to what they believe, but you do it in service of your allegiance to a greater whole, like humanity. So your warrior energy, right? So, yeah. So I think accepting your warrior energy, but taking responsibility for using it in service of the greater whole, rather than just in a conflict with some particular other. That's the the challenge. And it's hard because, you know, for me, I have to deal with the you know, the warrior and the healer, if you want to call it that, aspects of who I am and want to be in the world. But I think it's important to respect. I think it's important to respect both of those parts, and that they both have an adaptive potential, if applied, and that's the test. If applied to the needs of the whole. So I'm saying here, can we put our warrior part? Can we adapt our warrior spirit to fight for the planet and the species? And there are a lot of examples of that. I mean, there's a lot of fighting energy, a lot of people fighting fiercely and hard and smart, and with whatever resources they can imagine to bring to it, to make the changes that need to happen. Now, and this is something that helps me feel optimistic. Nature has always had to do its adaptation from its prior base. Evolution always has to work from here we are, now what? Life does. And so how that happens is that evolutionary process at every turn has had to repurpose what it's been given to meet its present conditions. Some examples of that are, and that you know, a good biologist would come up with a whole bunch, but there's just two that I'm aware of, was the repurposing of feathers, which were primarily, I'm told, for insulation and warmth, to flying. So this is a silly way to talk about it, but, you know, hey, I'd like to fly. What have I got? Oh, I've got feathers. Hey, maybe I can use them. There's an anthropomorphism for you, right? But here's one that's well studied. The repurposing of disgust, the instinct of disgust, which was originally adapted, you know, originally was adaptive and therefore got encoded for not eating rotten food. And that same instinct for disgust got applied to antisocial behavior. So the disgust that we feel when we see cruelty or injustice, or hurt or damage or violence, is an evolutionary repurposing of an instinct that had a different purpose originally. And I sort of thought that, and then I noticed, you know how people are, you know, when people see someone disemboweled, they throw up. We feel disgusted, but you can throw up when you see, you know, imagine, I purposely haven't done it, but imagine watching one of the not Taliban, the you know, the films of fundamentalists cutting the heads off people proudly. You know, you want to throw up. So it's been built into our instinctive and bodily responses. And that is an adaptation. So what I take from that is, if our instincts and the Quinn package of instincts are there to guide us in what belonging should feel like, what life should feel like, what it's like when we are in healthy relationship to the whole, and we go, the way we do when we look at things in nature that are just right. For instance, in nature, when you notice leaves on the ground and you notice they're all the same and they're all different, and that's beauty to us because we grew up in a world where things are, where there's repetition and there's uniqueness, and so we see that and we go, oh, that's right. So that sense of rightness, can we repurpose that? That is to say, our instinct for membership in the true way, in the full way, can we use our PFC, our prefrontal cortex, that our human consciousness, the consciousness that we as humans have evolved and that characterizes the human experiment? Can the human consciousness, which is the frontier of the human, of nature's human experiment, of nature's attempting the human experiment, can that be used? Can human consciousness be used? And can we adapt our evolutionary wisdom to a greater we? Can we adapt it to a we that is equivalent to the reach of our power, that's appropriate to the reach of our power? So a cell that's antisocial can be a cancerous cell, and it probably will be expelled by the system, or maybe it'll win and then the person dies of cancer, but then it dies because its existence wasn't compatible with the existence of the whole. So can we be ourselves and use what we have in a way that's compatible with the existence of a whole? And it has to be a whole appropriate to the reach of our present evolutionary power to affect the world and to co-create the world. And that's the experiment. We're on, I think, on the knife edge of that experiment, and that nature will decide. Not we won't. Nature will decide whether to keep riding this particular ship or move on without us. That's my wrap. That's a wrap on my wrap.
That was supposed to be the positive part.
Best I could do. Hey, repurposing, and we do have a instinctive guide that's been tested through the evolutionary process, available to us if we listen to it. And that's as positive as I can goddamn get.
Okay.
Sorry if it wasn't positive enough.
No, I think for me, there is value in understanding that if we can't cut it as human beings, the planet will take care of us. To me, there is a certain solace in that.
Yeah.
And
We'll take with us a lot.
okay.
We'll take with us a lot that we love, but nature will go on. So I know if I've said it this way before, but how I sometimes talked about it is that it's our job to be the best version of the human experiment we can be. But ultimately whether that human experiment was a good idea or a bad idea, that decision will be made at that's above our pay grade. That decision will be made at a level above our pay grade.
One of the ways in which I have adapted to the whole, if you so to speak, in the terms of what we're talking about, is on social media. I never, no matter how much I disagree or think it's crazy, something that's posted, I never respond in a negative way to it. If I can't say something positive or kind, I don't say anything at all. I'm a silent witness to the battle, basically. And sometimes it's very difficult, and especially, I mean, being a nurse and all of the misinformation out there. I mean, sometimes it's very difficult to do. But then if I can find something that seems to be a common thread that makes humanity valuable, and there's a truth there, then I might post something like that I know both facets of the people I have within my realm can understand and can agree with. You know, something uplifting, something inspirational, I'll post that instead some other time, you know. And both sides, the far right and the far left, will both, you know, usually make comment or put a like or whatever on it. And so I try not to be controversial in that way. And that is my way here and now to be able to work for the whole, even the parts I don't agree with. That's how
That's
I do
cool.
it. That's how I have reconciled it.
That's what you bring to the, that's what you bring to it. Wonderful. And that takes a lot. Takes a lot. Yeah, I try in the places where I realize I basically do not have it in me to be civil. That's not the, you know, I try not to just indulge that. I mean, I'll do rants, but I won't, the person won't hear them. So we don't have a lot of time left. I was going to do an experiential. I'm trying to, I don't know if it makes sense to try and scrunch it in here. You want to try an 8-minute experiential as an ending, or should we just wind this down by whatever chatting we want to do about it?
I'm open to either, really. What do you want to do?
Well, you know what, I'll do the experiential and maybe more talking than getting to actually do it fully, but then people can take it with you know, let's see what we can do with it. So I want to use this idea of the acceptance of the whole self, right? We say narcissism is wanting to celebrate some part of yourself, usually your vigor and power, and reject some part of yourself, usually your vulnerability. But it could be your anger or rage or whatever. So we've been sort of working on how does your executive function or your internal witness treat and allow the wholeness of you. So one way to do that is if you do a meditation in which you're plugging into your stealth experience in your body, then you may find that you're trying to say, I'm supposed to feel peaceful. I'm supposed to feel spiritual. I'm, you know, whatever. For that experience to be one in which you hold and accept whatever feelings do come up for you. And then at the same time that you're feeling rage, disgust, anger, hopeless, whatever you're feeling, there's a bigger part of you which is holding it, which is witnessing it and accepting it and soothing it and standing up for your wholeness. So if you take that, that's a way to me of situating a meditative process within a checking in with your body and your wholeness and your actual experience in your body, fitting that into the overall theme here. The next thing I want to do, but anyone could do this as a homework, we talked about checking in with the your livingness, the literal experience of you as a living organism, and experiencing how life, ongoing life within you, is the same thing and connected with ongoing life outside you. And therefore, checking in with your experience of your livingness at your source connects you to life in general. And then we talked about taking a walk, or sometimes it's apparently called a nature bath, where you allow yourself to be transparent to what's outside you and have a conversation, if you want to call it that, or experience your relationship of inside and outside. So that was the homework suggested at one point. So taking a walk and just working with that. And the next piece, and we'll do that next time, but you can start this yourself, is you can, in that conversation, or at any point in this, you can say, what movement wants to happen? What does my body want to do? When I look at this tree, does my body want to go like this? Or does it go, or, what wants to happen in me? And notice how your inner witness either allows or disallows that. So your inner witness may say, boy, that's a clumsy movement, or that's ugly, or that's too angry, or that's blah, blah. Or my God, who's looking? Or your inner, so that's good in the sense that now you notice, oh, okay, part of me thinks every movement I make has to be beautiful. I don't know, how do I be all right with ugly movements? So that's a way of training your internal witness to allow your body to express what it wants to express, where that's coming not from some idea of I'm trying to be peaceful or beautiful or angry or whatever else. Those ideas may interact with it, but where I'm actually following a organic biological impulse in me. And you can do that by witnessing and being witnessed by, in relationship to, for instance, a tree or the sun or leaves or whatever. So yeah, I guess I'll just leave that with not quite able to provide the opportunity to do it right here in the remaining minutes, but there's something to think about and mess around with and see if it works for you or if it's interesting to you. But the attempt of this course is to make these, there's a lot of big fancy ideas I'm throwing around, and to make them relevant to our personal experience and how we treat ourselves and where we find nourishment that we need to be ourselves in the midst of all the depressing or terrifying challenges that we have the privilege of being on this planet and of representing our species on this planet at this particular moment. Siobhan, you're leaning forward. Are you pushing buttons or want to say something? But you're muted.
You're still muted, Javon.
Still muted.
So if you find three little buttons there, three little points, click on it. You can write on your own. You can go onto your own little picture of yourself. Push the three buttons, and it'll offer you the opportunity to unmute yourself. Click on your thumbnail. This is tantalizing because I'm sure you've got something really cool to say. No sound. So if I click on my picture, no, actually it works when I click on you. Well, at the bottom where you see the 3 dots that say more. Nope. Sorry, that's not it.
On mine, it's on the top. The 3 dots are on top, on the right-hand side. I'm gonna head off.
Okay, so
I'll
Javon,
see you next
Javon,
week.
you owe us. We need to hear this next time.
Yeah. Yep, see you next week.
Bye-bye, Quinn.
Bye.
It's just you and me, Javon, so you can take your time if you want to see if you can solve it. On the bottom of my screen, I have a mute or unmute on the left, under the picture of me.
Here I am.
Ah! Well, this better be good.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, where are you from? I like the way
I'm-
you end your words with an en instead of ing. Sounds
Yeah,
southern.
I'm from North Carolina.
Ah, cool.
A graduate from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I spent a lot of time in Hoopa and with the three tribes, the Yuroks, the Hoopas, and the Karuks. And they carry on their traditions from, 10,000-year-old traditions.
Yeah.
And they, every 2 years, they have a white deerskin dance. And they understand it as recreating their world. And they practice that, recreating their world.
Mm,
And they have their most sacred ceremonies
mm,
is the recreating of the world.
mm,
So that they have operated for thousands of years on the notion
mm,
that they're responsible
mm,
for recreating the world
mm.
in their ceremonies, in their lives. And the reason I think of this is because the idea of tribes warring against each other, at least in one part of the Northwest, was not the case. These 3 tribes worked for thousands of years to live together, to allow each other to have their own territory, and to gather together for ceremonies, expressing their work to recreate the world. And I think that it's a good example of what
Yeah.
we are always having to do in our
Yeah.
lives and in our politics and in our cultures, is that we do participate in this world, and yet it's a world that we create, and we are responsible for keeping it and recreating it all the time.
Mhm.
And we have special ceremonies to celebrate our work
Mm.
of recreating our world. And it was a beautiful thing to see and to live in for a long time. But it's the notion that tribes war against each other. I'm not sure that that was the way it was for 10,000 years. It may have been just a very recent thing.
Mm.
Anyway, that's what I was going to say.
That's wonderful. Yeah. My son accuses me often of sort of romanticizing native tribes. And that's one of the grounds. And I've always wanted to believe that they all, found ways to get along and stuff. And I also know that when you're looking at the behavior of tribes that are already in some way under pressure, from then it's important to notice that some of that behavior may be a result of that pressure. But I do still, I mean, certainly the Sioux and the Plains Indians, man. And I think so, and I think, as a white person, it's easy to say that the Indians had a common interest as opposed to the white invaders. But it's not hard to imagine that they didn't think, oh, we're Indians, because they're only Indians compared to the white invaders, but that we're Sioux or we're this or that. And in some ways to cut off, in some way to have the other tribe be other, and I know a lot of them call themselves the people or the real people, or, have some, so I don't know. I love to hear examples that support me in as positive a view of that as possible. But it could be that's everything they did doesn't have to be wonderful. It certainly didn't allow them to unite against the invaders. It allowed them to be scouts for the invaders. Amazing, Crazy Horse, my God, ended up scouting against the Crow, I think it was. The hero people. So it's like, holy shit. But anyway, they don't have to be our perfect example, but where they definitely are ahead of us is in knowing that they were situated within the natural world in a way that we forgot. And so the ceremony you're just talking about is like, whoa, yeah. I mean, that's beautiful, that we create.
Well, it was a hard life for them all. It was, being in this culture is really hard for everybody. Yet they maintain their ceremonies.
Fantastic.
They maintain them, and they maintain that connection to their past and to each other. They maintained it in the ceremonial spiritual structure realm, but not in the rest of life. The rest of life was hard and difficult.
Well, in some way, they've been offered essentially the place of poor white rednecks in the culture as a whole, including alcoholism and guns, and that's sort of the niche that they were allowed. So what were the tribes you mentioned?
It's the Yurok. They're the downriver on the Klamath, and the Karuks, they're upriver on the Klamath, and the Hoopas, they're upriver from the confluence on the Trinity River. And they've lived there together for thousands of years.
So those are the places if you just go down the river, if you go down towards the Trinity Alps, if you take whatever the route is that goes down the Klamath, beautiful route.
Happy Camp is Karuk.
Cool. And I think those tribes have also come together to try and fight for enough water for the salmon and so forth, right?
Yeah, that's one of their strongest political works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a unity there. Interesting, but so that's wonderful. So that's a unity around a shared watershed and an understanding of their shared.
Yeah, the Klamath and the Trinity watershed. Yeah.
Well, that's great. That'll help me, because I've driven through there once or twice, and it's the most glorious country I can imagine. Long ride.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. Pretty beautiful. Yeah.
Are you a minister or something, or?
Yes, I am. I'm a Presbyterian.
Ah. Are you active in that role or?
I was until 2014 when I retired.
Uh-huh.
I attend a Quaker meeting now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's so sad to me about the fundamentalist thing is that there's such a rich, pro-life, pro-decency, such a beautiful Christian tradition. I've not been brought up in any religion myself, but I've really respected. I mean, religion is one way that community gets created, and if that community can get created in service of something positive like Christianity can be, then it is one of the few ways that people can get together. And I think if you're a minister in that sort of a thing, then that's a really contributing role.
Yeah, it is. It's a good thing.
Also, I was involved. I was involved in this is in. I'm 76, so I was involved in the STS and the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement, and so I spent a lot of time exposed to the music and the stuff of people, Black people, deeply in their church. And talk about repurposing.
I tell you a funny story. I was working at the campus ministry at San Francisco State, and I was assigned to the SDS.
You were to minister to us.
So I was the chaplain for the SDS.
Did you succeed in ministering to us? Were we ministerable?
Yeah. Yes. It worked out quite well.
That's great. I went to Williams College. And Coffin was the chaplain just before us. And then he became the chaplain of the Riverside Church. And so he became a big voice of the progressive Christianity in that area. Yeah. So why, I guess Rita sort of said that the fundamentalists were able to exploit and access the commercial big church media thing. And I suppose real congregations don't do that or aren't designed to do that, or what?
No, they don't.
And that makes sense, but I sure hate to see the progressives lose the fight for the church. I mean, I don't personally have a stake in the church, except that I've experienced it as being able to play a positive role. And most of all, that we don't have non-church ways of convening community, really. We don't have structures that convene community in the way that a church does, that convene them around spirituality.
Yeah, mainly values, and just the Presbyterian Church is based on a democracy, representative government, rules and regulations, Book of Order, Robert's Rules of Order.
So it's a place where people learn civility, learn and practice civility.
Yes, it is. It's like a 500-year history of developing ways to fight together.
Yeah.
In a civil way.
Yeah.
Over important values and issues. So it's just one of those things. So it's really difficult for me as a Presbyterian to see this attack on democracy, because that's part of my religion is democracy. Been trained in it, brought up in it. I'm a parliamentarian. You know,
Mhm.
it's just really difficult to see the attack on democracy and the values of democracy, which is all about belonging. Like your title of your course of belonging, it's all
Yeah.
about democracy. Is all about everybody participating
Yeah.
in the body and supporting one another and being responsible and accountable.
And like you said, being
so
part of a larger body. Yeah.
yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I love the analogy of citizenship to a niche, logical niche, to being a good citizen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's your time situation? Do you have a few more minutes to chat, or are you winding down?
I do have a few more minutes. I have about 6 more minutes, I think. 6 more minutes. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a
At
dream.
3 o'clock.
I'm going to share a dream I had, if you don't mind.
Okay.
It's, I had this dream that some woman who sort of a woman of substance, a good person, a middle-aged, mature woman. And I think she was based on, I had just heard a congresswoman from California talk, and I went, this is what a politician should be. Just a normal, natural person who's dedicated to the whole, So I think this woman the dream figure was, anyway, she was about to be tried. There was going to be a trial. And she wasn't at all defensive or insecure or afraid. She just was matter of fact. But there was a trial about to happen. And then I look into the room where the trial is, and it's a little small town trial room. In fact, it looks like they adapted some room in the library to be the court, and they have little folding chairs up, and there's about to be a trial. And I notice I'm partly comforted by this because I'm going like, okay, these are just ordinary, decent people. And a little part of me is not comforted because I think of the Salem witch trials or racism, who can go bad. And then there's someone who intones, this is the judge apparently, who intones in a very male and way that what I'm dedicated to and what matters is that we adhere to the rules of the legal process. And that's what I'm here for. And which is, that's important. That's what we're here for. That's what I care about. I'm going to make sure that happens. And implied in it is also, he's not very interested in the results. It's not so much that we have a just result, but by God, we're going to keep a system of rules alive. And that fits with the thing where I was saying, thank God for the rules, if they can hold someone accountable, I get it. And then someone who reminded me of a wonderful therapist, leader person I know, a woman, and she's wearing something like a yarmulke or a Andean knit Indian cap, but something that's something ceremonial about her. And she's saying, what we need is trust. And it's almost like she's saying, okay, rules are cool, but they're only going to work if there's a basic trust. And meaning, I think, just civility, trust in each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed that the ground under us, that there's leaks in the ground under us, and that there's poisonous fumes coming up. And then I realized that the whole ground is sort of bulging up as though it's going to explode from pressure underneath. And those are coming from and what's coming up, the gas is apparently poisonous because people are nodding out. And I go, oh my God, someone's got to go down and pull the switch on the boiler or whatever the hell it is that's overheating. And I look at the person who's the janitor or the technician, the person who knows about these things and ought to be able to do it, but he's nodding out from the gas. And I go, oh, so the people that are supposed to take care of this aren't. And I go, shit, it's on me. Somebody has to do something. It's on me. So I go like, well, I don't know. I'm going to be, these people are passing out here. I'm going to be having to do a lot of breathing into this shit to try and do something. Anyway, nothing for it to do but to go down into the basement. And I go down there and I fumble around, but I don't know how these damn machines work or boilers work or whatever. But I noticed that I seem to be surviving. I mean, breathing this stuff in, and I'm still functioning. So cool. And at some point, I find there's a little anti-room, and I reach behind stuff, and I find the breaker switch, and I turn it off. Turn the boiler off. That's it. Then I wake up. But
that's a great image.
Isn't
Can
it?
I comment on it?
Certainly.
Okay. You're talking about this is how I hear this. You're talking about the frontal lobes,
Yeah.
and the decision area and an analytical area, right?
Yeah.
And you're asking us through this meditation to go below that. That's interesting that you're telling me about this dream, because it's a really nice model of going below the frontal lobes into the more feeling level of things, for things feel, and their relationships between all of these people, and the functions in and all the operations that are going on down there. And we usually don't go there very often, but we inhabit it all the time. Every moment we're inhabiting that area.
Yeah.
And yet we have these frontal lobes that seem to say, well, this is all there is, and then,
they
then
think
we
they're on their own.
but we say, but we know about the other 80-90% that's going on there, right? And we go down there every now and then and work in that area. And so it basically functions as kind of a humiliating, or not humiliating, but
Humbling. Yeah.
experience of experiencing that, my frontal lobes aren't the only thing that about me is important. There's a massive more that's going on here.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, most of your brain and your heart and your gut and everything they're all working 100% all the time, and they're all just moving right along and getting along with everybody. Everybody's getting along, and they're making everything work. And they're saying that, so those frontal lobes, you can use those to help us out. And so that's what we would like you to do, is to use those frontal lobes to help us out, because we're working as much as we can, as hard as we can all the time. And a little appreciation and
well, let me take off on that for a minute. That's cool. That's lovely. Thank you. Because the other way, another part of how I saw that was, this woman represents reasonable decency. That's on trial. And to do that, we need structures and rules and something that holds us accountable. But then someone says, yeah, that's fine. But if we don't have trust or love or caring or mutual respect, it ain't going to work.
Yeah, down there.
And then down there, now this may fit into how you put it or not, or be maybe another angle. The fact is, in the meantime, there is the anger, the heat down there, the anger down there, this is what I got from it, is building up to such a point that it's about to blow the whole thing up. And that it's leaking poisonous gas, and it's leaking it to the point where we aren't conscious. We're going to go unconscious. If we go unconscious, we're going to die, right? The CO2, if you go to sleep with it, you're going to not wake up. So we're going to die. And the person who's supposed to be taking care of it, this janitor technician person, he ain't going to be able to do it because he's poisoned by all this. So something has to be adjusted right down there, but in some way, what has to happen down there is some sort of turning off of the heat, turning off of the social heat, if you want to call it that. Anyway.
Yeah, you got to go down there.
You got to go down. So and I remember being surprised. I was thinking, like, I should be passing out. These people are all passing out. And this is my fourth breath, sixth breath, eighth breath down here, and I still got to do this, and I seem to be doing it. So I've wondered about sharing that in the last class. If I did, it would be, so if there's something that in that dream, I'm called, that's something have no choice but to do, or I'm called to do. What are you called to do? Can we each talk about whatever we feel called to do, given this situation of the world?
Mhm. Yeah,
So.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is cool.
Yes.
Thanks for hanging with me here. I've enjoyed this.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't know why I don't know why my pictures went away.
Yeah.
but they did.
Yeah.
Anyway, great. Thank you. This is a very interesting, important conversation. And that our democracy is really against the wall here.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Republicans that don't care and just as soon get rid of it and go with the corporate
Who
elite.
would have thought? Who would have thought? That so shortly after defeating fascism, not finally, but defeating fascism in the war, that here we are.
Yeah.
All right,
Who
sir.
would have thought?
Hmm.
Okay.
All right.
See
Be
you
well.
next
But
week.
I'm going to say what I'm hoping the main theme of the course is, we are not alone. We're not orphans or uninvited guests on this planet, and the planet and evolution and our souls offer us resources that are available to us in trying to do what we need to do.
Yes, that we have them.
Yeah.
We have them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The deeper we go, the better.
All right. You have a good week, sir. You have a
Okay,
deep
yeah,
week,
sure.
sir. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.